When school pickup time came, Michael was always early. 25 years of military experience had taught him discipline. But that day, when he went to pick up Emma, he was seen as a dangerous person. After the police response, the wounded warrior father was shot in front of his daughter's eyes. Welcome to Storyline Universe. Tuesday, October 17th, 2024. Command Sergeant Major Michael Davis sat in his pickup truck in the school parking lot, checking his watch. 3:12 p.m. Emma's class got out at 3:15, and he was always early. After 25 years in the Army, punctuality wasn't just a habit, it was a way of life. At 42, Michael was an imposing figure. 6'3", broad shoulders, with the kind of military bearing that sometimes made civilians uncomfortable, even though he'd never done anything to warrant such reactions. His serious demeanor and disciplined posture were simply the result of 25 years serving his country. Today was special. Emma had been chosen for the school's honor roll ceremony, and Michael had taken leave from his duties at Fort Carson to be there. His dress uniform was hanging in the back seat, ready for the ceremony at 4 p.m. Michael glanced around the familiar parking lot. He'd been picking Emma up from Jefferson Elementary for 3 years, ever since his wife Sarah had started working double shifts at the hospital. The teachers knew him, the crossing guards waved to him, and Emma's friends always ran up to say hello to Emma's Army dad. But today, something felt different. A woman in an SUV 2 spaces over was staring at him intently, her phone pressed to her ear. She'd been there when he arrived, and she kept glancing in his direction with what looked like anxiety. Michael had experienced this before. His military bearing and imposing physical presence sometimes made people nervous, even in completely innocent situations. Michael checked his appearance in the rearview mirror. Clean-shaven, wearing a simple button-down shirt and khakis. Nothing that should draw attention, but he'd learned over the years that sometimes his presence alone made people uncomfortable, regardless of his service to his country. Michael tried not to think about it. He'd learned over the years that some people found veterans intimidating, especially those with his size and military bearing. It had nothing to do with his character or intentions. It was simply an unfortunate reality of how some civilians perceived military personnel. The school bell rang, and children began streaming out of the building. Michael got out of his truck and walked toward the pickup area, scanning the crowd for Emma's bright yellow backpack. That's when he heard the sirens. What Michael didn't know was that Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, the woman in the SUV, had been on the phone with 911 for the past 5 minutes. "Yes, I'm calling from Jefferson Elementary School," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "There's a suspicious man in the parking lot. He's been sitting in his truck for about 10 minutes, just watching the school." The 911 operator asked for more details. "Can you describe the individual, ma'am?" "He's a large man, mid-40s, very imposing. He's now standing near the pickup area. I don't recognize him, and I know most of the parents here." Mrs. Hendricks had moved to Riverside 6 months ago and was still learning the community. She'd heard about school security threats on the news and had become hyper-vigilant about anything that seemed out of place. "Has he made any threatening gestures or statements?" the operator asked. "Not exactly, but he's just standing there, watching. It doesn't feel right." The operator dispatched 2 patrol units to investigate a suspicious person at Jefferson Elementary. The call went out over police radio as a potential school safety issue, which meant it would receive immediate priority response. Officer Brian Martinez and Officer Jennifer Walsh were the first to respond. Both were experienced officers, but they'd been responding to an increased number of school-related calls lately, and tensions were high. "Dispatch, we're approaching Jefferson Elementary," Martinez radioed. "What's the nature of the suspicious activity?" "Caller reports adult male, mid-40s, large build, loitering near the school pickup area. Caller describes behavior as suspicious and concerning." As the patrol cars pulled into the parking lot, Michael was helping a kindergartner who had dropped her lunchbox. He didn't notice the police vehicles until he heard car doors slamming behind him. "Excuse me, sir," Officer Martinez called out as he approached. "Can we speak with you for a moment?" Michael turned around, immediately noticing the officer's posture and hand positions. After 25 years in the military, he could read tactical situations instantly. These officers were on high alert. "Of course, officers," Michael replied calmly, keeping his hands visible. "Is there a problem?" "We received a report about someone acting suspiciously in the school area," Officer Walsh said. "Can you tell us what you're doing here?" "I'm picking up my daughter, Emma Davis," Michael explained. "She's in Mrs. Patterson's third grade class. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday." Officer Martinez looked around the parking lot. "Do you have identification, sir?" Michael slowly reached for his wallet, moving deliberately to avoid any sudden movements. He'd been through enough interactions like this to know the importance of staying calm and compliant. "I'm going to reach for my wallet now," he said clearly, then handed over his driver's license and military ID. Officer Walsh examined the documents. "Command Sergeant Major Davis," she read aloud. "You're military?" "Yes, ma'am." 25 years, currently stationed at Fort Carson. I took leave today to attend my daughter's honor roll ceremony. The officers exchanged glances. The military ID was legitimate. The man was being completely cooperative and his story was verifiable. But they'd responded to a school safety call, and they needed to be thorough. "Sir, the person who called said you were acting suspiciously," Martinez explained. "Can you help us understand what might have caused that impression?" Michael felt a familiar weight in his chest. "Officer, I've been picking my daughter up from this school for 3 years. I arrive early, I wait in my truck, and when the bell rings, I come stand in the pickup area. That's what I was doing today. That's when Emma came running out of the building. Daddy! Emma Davis burst through the crowd of children, her yellow backpack bouncing as she ran toward Michael. Her face was bright with excitement, and she was clutching a certificate in her small hand. "Look, Daddy, I got my honor roll certificate. Mrs. Patterson said I'm one of the best students in 3rd grade. Michael's entire demeanor transformed. The imposing military bearing softened as he knelt down to Emma's level, his face lighting up with pure parental pride. "That's incredible, sweetheart," he said, accepting the certificate and giving Emma a big hug. "I'm so proud of you." Emma noticed the police officers and looked up at them with curiosity rather than fear. "Hi, police officers. Are you here for the ceremony too?" Officer Walsh felt something shift in her perception of the situation. This clearly wasn't a threat to the school. This was a father picking up his daughter, just like dozens of other parents did every day. "Emma," Michael said gently, "these officers were just checking to make sure everyone at school was safe. Can you say hello?" "Hello," Emma said brightly. "My daddy's in the Army. He protects people too, just like you." Officer Martinez looked at Michael with new understanding. "Sir, I apologize for any inconvenience. We were responding to a call, but it's clear there's been a misunderstanding." "I understand, officer," Michael replied. "You were doing your job." But Mrs. Patterson, Emma's teacher, had noticed the commotion and approached the group. "Is everything all right here? Sergeant Major Davis, is there a problem?" "No problem, Mrs. Patterson," Michael assured her. "Just a misunderstanding." Mrs. Patterson looked confused. "Sergeant Major Davis is one of our most involved parents. He volunteers for school events. He's helping with our Veterans Day program next month. Is someone saying he doesn't belong here?" The situation was becoming clearer to the officers, but before they could respond, more patrol cars arrived. The second wave of responding officers hadn't received the updated information about Michael's identity or the clarification of the situation. They saw what appeared to be a large man surrounded by police officers at a school, and their training kicked in. "Step away from the child," Officer David Thompson commanded as he exited his patrol car. Michael felt Emma tense beside him. "Daddy, why is that man yelling?" "It's okay, sweetheart," Michael said softly, but his military instincts were now fully engaged. He could see the situation deteriorating rapidly. Officer Martinez tried to explain. "Thompson, this is Command Sergeant Major Davis. He's picking up his daughter. It's been resolved." But Thompson hadn't heard the full briefing. In his mind, he was responding to a school threat, and he saw a large man who hadn't immediately complied with his command. "Sir, I need you to step away from the child and put your hands where I can see them," Thompson repeated, his hand moving toward his weapon. Michael realized the situation was spinning out of control. Other parents were beginning to notice the commotion, children were watching, and Emma was becoming frightened. "Officers," Michael said, raising his hand slowly, "I'm going to comply with your instructions, but I need you to understand that this is my daughter and you're scaring her." Emma grabbed onto Michael's leg. "Daddy, I'm scared. Why are the police yelling?" Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. "Officers, please, this is one of our parents. He's here for his daughter's honor roll ceremony. I can vouch for him." But Thompson was focused on what he perceived as a potential threat. "Ma'am, please step back. Sir, keep your hands visible and move away from the child." Michael looked down at Emma, who was now crying and clinging to him. In that moment, he made the same choice any father would make. He reached down to comfort his frightened daughter. Thompson saw the sudden movement toward the child and reacted. The sound of the gunshot echoed across the school parking lot like thunder. Children screamed. Parents rushed to shield their kids. Teachers began herding students back into the building. Michael staggered backward, clutching his shoulder where Thompson's bullet had struck him. Blood began seeping through his shirt, but his first thought wasn't for himself. It was for Emma. "Emma, get behind Mrs. Patterson," he managed to say, even as he fell to one knee. Emma was sobbing, not understanding why her father was bleeding, why the nice police officer had hurt her daddy. Officer Martinez immediately called for medical assistance, while Officer Walsh tried to secure the scene. Mrs. Patterson gathered Emma in her arms, shielding her from the sight of her father's injury. "What the hell happened?" Martinez demanded of Thompson. "He made a sudden movement toward the child," Thompson replied, but his voice was shaking. I thought he was going to—" "He was comforting his daughter," Martinez shouted. "This is Command Sergeant Major Davis, United States Army. He's a decorated veteran picking up his child from school." The reality of what had occurred began to sink in for everyone present. A 25-year military veteran, a man who had served his country with distinction, had been shot by police while picking up his daughter from school. Michael remained conscious, his training helping him manage the shock and pain. "Emma," he called out weakly, "Daddy's okay. I need you to stay with Mrs. Patterson." But Emma broke free from her teacher and ran to her father. "Daddy, you're bleeding. Why did the police hurt you?" It was a question that no one in that parking lot could adequately answer. The ambulance arrived within 6 minutes, followed by a flood of additional emergency responders, supervisors, and eventually, media. What had started as a routine school pickup had become a crisis that would dominate local and national news. As paramedics worked to stabilize Michael, his military ID and the full scope of his service record became clear to the responding supervisors. Command Sergeant Major Michael Davis, 25 years of service, 3 combat deployments, Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Silver Star for Valor. He was currently assigned to train the next generation of military leaders at Fort Carson. Police Chief Robert Williams arrived at the scene and immediately understood the magnitude of the situation. A decorated war hero had been shot by his officers while picking up his daughter from school. "I want a full investigation launched immediately," Williams told his supervisors, "and I want to know exactly how this happened." The initial 911 call was reviewed. Mrs. Hendricks' report of a suspicious person was based entirely on her unfamiliarity with the school community and her own anxieties about school safety. She had seen a man waiting for his child and interpreted his presence as threatening. At the hospital, Michael underwent surgery to remove the bullet from his shoulder. The injury wasn't life-threatening, but it would require months of recovery and physical therapy. Emma stayed with her mother, Sarah, who had rushed from the hospital where she worked as a nurse. The 8-year-old was traumatized by seeing her father shot and couldn't understand why someone would hurt her daddy. "Mommy, why did the police shoot Daddy?" Emma asked repeatedly. "Daddy helps people. Daddy's one of the good guys." Sarah had no answer that would make sense to an 8-year-old child. The investigation into the shooting was swift and thorough. Body camera footage from all responding officers was reviewed, witness statements were taken, and the timeline of events was reconstructed minute by minute. What the investigation revealed was a cascade of failures. Mrs. Hendricks had called 911 based on assumptions, rather than actual threatening behavior. Her description of Michael as suspicious was based solely on her unfamiliarity with him and her general anxiety about school safety. The initial responding officers, Martinez and Walsh, had correctly assessed that Michael posed no threat and had begun to de-escalate the situation. Officer Thompson had arrived without full situational awareness and had reacted to what he perceived as a threat, rather than gathering information about what was actually occurring. Most critically, the shooting occurred when Michael reached toward his daughter to comfort her, a natural parental instinct that Thompson had misinterpreted as a potentially aggressive action. The police review board concluded that the shooting was unjustified and that multiple protocols had been violated. Officer Thompson was suspended pending criminal charges, and the department began implementing new training procedures for school-related calls. But for Michael and his family, the damage was already done. The shooting of Command Sergeant Major Davis sparked outrage throughout Riverside and beyond. Veterans organizations, military families, and community members demanded accountability and systemic changes. A GoFundMe campaign for Michael's medical expenses raised over $200,000 in 48 hours. Letters of support poured in from fellow veterans, military leaders, and strangers who were appalled by what had happened. General Patricia Rodriguez, commanding general of Fort Carson, issued a public statement. Command Sergeant Major Davis exemplifies the finest qualities of military service. He has dedicated his life to protecting our nation and training the soldiers who defend our freedom. What happened to him and his family is unacceptable. Jefferson Elementary held a solidarity assembly where students made cards for Emma and her father. Mrs. Patterson read a letter from the school administration expressing their support for the Davis family and their commitment to ensuring that all parents feel safe and welcome at school events. But the most powerful response came from Michael himself. 6 weeks after the shooting, Michael returned to Jefferson Elementary for a community meeting. His arm was still in a sling, but he insisted on attending. The gymnasium was packed with parents, teachers, students, and community members. Many had come to show support for Michael and his family, while others wanted to understand how such a tragedy could have occurred. Michael took the podium with Emma by his side, her small hand holding his uninjured arm. "My name is Command Sergeant Major Michael Davis," he began, his voice steady despite everything he'd been through. 6 weeks ago, I was shot in this school's parking lot while picking up my daughter. Today, I want to talk about how we move forward. The gymnasium was silent. "I'm not here to express anger or demand revenge," Michael continued. "I'm here because I believe this community is better than what happened that day. I believe we can learn from this tragedy and make sure it never happens again." He looked around the room, making eye contact with parents and teachers who had known him for years. "For 3 years, I picked up my daughter from this school without incident. Teachers knew me, other parents recognized me, and children like Emma felt safe around me. But on October 17th, someone who didn't know me saw me as a threat based on assumptions and fear." Michael paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've served this country for 25 years. I've been shot at by enemies overseas, and I've always known that was part of the job. But I never expected to be shot in my own community, in front of my own child, while doing something as simple as picking her up from school." Emma tugged on his shirt, and Michael smiled down at her before continuing. My daughter asked me why the police shot her daddy. I told her that sometimes people make mistakes when they're afraid, and that it's our job to help them learn to make better choices. The crowd began to stir with emotion. I don't want Officer Thompson to go to prison, Michael said, surprising many in the audience. I want him to get better training. I want all our officers to get better training. I want our community to have conversations about bias, about assumptions, about what it means to truly see each other as neighbors. Mrs. Hendricks, who had made the initial 911 call, stood up from the back of the room. She was crying. "Sergeant Major Davis," she said, her voice breaking, "I am so sorry. I was new to the community. I was scared, and I made assumptions about you that were completely wrong. I don't know how to make this right." Michael looked at her with compassion rather than anger. "Ma'am, you can make it right by getting to know your neighbors, by asking questions before making assumptions, by helping build the kind of community where every parent feels safe bringing their children to school." The meeting continued for 2 more hours with community members discussing concrete steps for preventing similar incidents. A neighborhood watch program was established. Community coffee hours were scheduled, and the police department committed to new training protocols. But perhaps the most important outcome was the conversation itself, a community grappling honestly with how fear and assumptions had nearly destroyed an innocent family. 1 year later, Command Sergeant Major Michael Davis was the keynote speaker at Jefferson Elementary's Veterans Day ceremony. He spoke to a gymnasium full of students about service, sacrifice, and the importance of seeing the humanity in every person. Emma, now in 4th grade, introduced her father with pride. "This is my daddy. He's a soldier and a hero, and he teaches people how to be brave and kind." Officer Thompson had resigned from the police force and was working as a community counselor, helping to bridge gaps between law enforcement and the communities they served. He attended the ceremony and approached Michael afterward. "Sergeant Major," Thompson said quietly, "I know I can never fully make up for what I did to you and your family, but I want you to know that I've spent every day since then learning how to be better." Michael shook his hand. "That's all any of us can do, Officer Thompson. Learn from our mistakes and try to be better tomorrow than we were today." The Riverside Police Department had implemented new protocols for school-related calls, including mandatory de-escalation training and requirements for supervisory approval before any weapons were drawn on school property. Mrs. Hendricks had become one of the most active volunteers at Jefferson Elementary, coordinating community events and helping new families feel welcome in the neighborhood. And Emma Davis continued to be proud of her father, understanding now that his greatest act of heroism hadn't been anything he'd done overseas. It had been his choice to respond to being shot with grace, forgiveness, and a commitment to making his community better. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on foreign soil with weapons and uniforms. Sometimes they're fought in school parking lots and community meetings, with words and understanding, and the radical act of choosing love over fear. Command Sergeant Major Michael Davis had served his country with honor for 25 years. But his greatest service came after he'd been wounded, when he chose to heal his community's divisions rather than deepen them. So now I ask you, how can we build communities where every parent feels safe picking up their children? How can we move past assumptions and fear to see each other's humanity? What would it look like if we all chose understanding over suspicion? Share your thoughts in the comments, because here at Storyline Universe, we believe that the most powerful stories are the ones that challenge us to be better neighbors, better community members, and better human beings.